Ladies and gentlemen, ever since my little rant video on the Borderlands 4 trailer and the community's reaction, I've had a lot of people agree to some extent, but also a lot of people disagree. The Borderlands 2 fans have some strong opinions. I get it. It's an S-tier game. It's a good game. I've never once in any of it said it was a bad game. I'm just looking past the story downfalls of 3 and acknowledging the improvements. But now I have objective proof that 3 is better. Okay, maybe not objective. There's still some subjectivity, obviously. But let's take a look at this beautiful little Excel chart. This isn't a perfect science, I get that, but I just want to kind of explain where I'm coming from a little bit better and put some numbers behind it so that hopefully some of you who can at least try to think with an open mind and think critically about things can maybe see where I'm coming from.
Yeah! Science, bitch!
So this is pretty simple. We've got the game, and we've got the 3 main categories that I think make these games what they are. Story and the DLC, but focusing on the story aspect. The endgame and the loot, which focuses on the endgame activities and the loot grind and loot availability and rarities and all those things. And then the actual gameplay and mechanics. And this is the literal moment-to-moment gameplay, the movement, things like that. And I'll show you the weighted average here. Here's the equation, right? It takes each score multiplies by the weight up top. We've got to check it to make sure the weight is 100. So right now, let's explain the points that I have in here, the scores, and then we can start playing with weighting. For the story and DLC, I give 2 a perfect 5 out of 5. It's amazing. We all get that. That's why people like 2 so much more than 3. When we look at 3, I'm giving it a 3. Some people might argue 1 or 2, but you have to also acknowledge that the DLC in 3 is fantastic. I would actually argue that it's better than the DLC in 2. Regardless, they both have great DLCs, but I think the DLC does some lifting and pulls 3 overall up to a 3. It's an okay story. There are certainly some awful points, but there's some good stuff in there too. You can't say that it's the worst story of all time. Maybe we can argue 2, we can play with that later. You'll see that it doesn't change that much. Endgame and loot, it's very good in 2. We know this, but it's not perfect, and the amount of variety is pretty low. And I know that the legendary drop rates in 3 is too much for most people, but the drop rates in 2 is almost too low. I think there's a happy medium somewhere. Either way, we're giving Borderlands 2 a 4 in this category. For Borderlands 3, I'm giving it a 5 specifically because of the endgame grind. You have way more slaughter domes, trials, raid bosses, the events like the cartels and the Bloody Harvest. There's just more to do in this game, regardless of a lack of Ultimate Vault Hunter. And I know that Mayhem sucks. It's a flawed system, but so are OP levels in 2. Okay, we have to give credit where it's due. The overall endgame and loot, that experience in 3 is an improvement. And if we're going to give a 4 to Borderlands 2, then we have to give a 5 to Borderlands 3.
Yeah, I did it! I ain't sorry!
You want to go 3 and 4, I'm cool with that too. It doesn't change the overall narrative I'm going for here. Also, holy shit, I forgot to mention slag. Hello? Yeah, slag is a cool element. I'm not saying it's bad, but I'm saying the way that they forced you into it in order to basically compete in any way, shape, or form in Endgame in Borderlands 2 is absurd. You gotta remember that. You have to be reasonable. You have to be able to look at your baby, your darling, precious Borderlands 2 and acknowledge it's not perfect. And slag is an example of just that.
Just vomited in my mouth a little.
All right, and then finally, the actual gameplay, the actual mechanics. This is the moment-to-moment action, the way the game feels, the way the game plays, the literal, like, ignore the story, ignore the loot. How does the game feel? We can all agree that 3 feels better. To my experience, and my opinion, it's a 5. Again, I know that you maybe could argue a 4 here, but with Borderlands 2, it's worse. It feels more dated. There's less movement abilities. It's a clunkier game. It's not unplayable. I'm playing Borderlands 2 right now, going through True Vault Hunter mode on a 0 character. It's a good time, but I miss a lot of the moment-to-moment improvements in 3, especially some of the quality of life things. So the actual gameplay, I'm going 3 and 5 here. If we start playing with numbers, if for some reason you care so much about the gameplay and less about story and endgame, the numbers update, right? That is too much. We got to go 50% here, 3.7 to 4.3, right? So it's going to update over time. So if we have a relatively even 33, 33, 33, I know it's technically only 99, slight edge to Borderlands 3. If we go, okay, you like story the most, but it's only slightly more, it brings the gap closer, but it's still in favor. If you go 30, 40, 30, right? You go 30, 30, 40, right? It pretty much all circumstances lead to an edge to Borderlands 3. Now, if you're really mad about this being a 5, we bring this down to a 4. Obviously, the score drops a little bit, but still has the edge. If you want this to be a 4, well, then you got to bring this down to a 3. If you want this to be a 2, you can start playing with things. Let's go back to an even relative weighting. Now, Borderlands 3 has the edge. Let's say you're like me, and you really like the mechanics the most, so you give a massive 50% of the weight to the gameplay and the mechanics, then these both drop down to 25 even. Then Borderlands 2 still has the edge, but I dropped all these down, remember? I still think it's a 3.55. Now all of a sudden a massive difference. So there is some subjectivity. This needs to go back up to a 4, sorry. Still a pretty big difference. So my main point here is that it really depends on what you weight the most. In my opinion, with the scores that I've given that I think are pretty fair, Borderlands 2 only edges out Borderlands 3 if you really care about story. We're talking something like this. And even then, look, it's even. Let's go like 30, 25 here. Still gets beat. You pretty much have to go to a 50% weight on the story in order to see difference, and even then it's not a direct win, right? The numbers are totally, these weights are completely up to you as a gamer, and I totally understand that a lot of the Borderlands 2 community does have this strong weight for the story, for the DLC, but you have to understand that Endgame and Loot is another massive aspect, and then the gameplay, the moment-to-moment action right here, is another massive aspect. And it's not really that arguable. The gameplay is better in 3 than 2, and the Endgame Loot, all of that is overall arguably better in 3 than 2, if not even. Let's call it even. Let's try to be even more. I'm giving you more of a benefit of the doubt here. Let's go back. Pretty even, right? You'd have to go 40, 30, 30 to see that difference, but not everyone's like that. Some people are 30, 30, 40. And then Borderlands 3 gets the win again. And I think because we're playing a game, not watching a movie, not watching TV, playing a game, the moment-to-moment gameplay should have the highest weight. So even if you want to keep it pretty even, but you weight this a little bit higher, the edge goes to 3. And I think this should be at least a 4.5 or a 5. I don't really want to do half numbers, but let's do half numbers and like really reel it in, right? Main story sucks, but DLC helps. Pull it up to 2.5, it's average. Perfect story in Borderlands 2, it's a 5. Endgame, pretty good, even better. Mechanics are dated, really good. Let's go 33, 33, 33, even. So again, if you care more about story, that'll give that the edge. But if you're anyone else who cares about anything else more, then it's even, or it gives the edge to Borderlands 3. And really, most people should kind of be in this camp where maybe, I don't know. We can play with the numbers forever, but ultimately, story and DLC is kind of the only aspect where Borderlands 2 beats Borderlands 3. So I'm repeating myself here in a circle, but hopefully it makes sense here where you're understanding that if that's the most important aspect for you, great. You can say Borderlands 2 is the better game, but we have to look at things realistically, and we have to understand that there are improvements in Borderlands 3 over Borderlands 2, where it just becomes mathematically impossible to say that 2 is the better overall game, because it's only better in that one story-driven main aspect. The other aspects of a game, like the endgame stuff, things that people complain so strongly about with Wonderlands, and the actual gameplay, those things are important too. And most people are going to weight these things a little bit different, but not everyone just thinks story is the most important. For the people who don't, 3 is the better game. Hopefully this was a little bit helpful to at least understand my point of view. And I'm not alone here. There are plenty of people who are agreeing with me in these videos. Not everyone, but some people are. I know creators specifically like K6 share a similar opinion where he puts more weight on the actual gameplay than the story. And I'll say it again, story's super important for like 1 playthrough, maybe 2. After that, you're doing endgame stuff. You're playing the game. Yeah, the chatter in the corner, it can be annoying. Those voice logs can be annoying. Some characters make shitty decisions in Borderlands 3. I get it, but you don't have to deal with that every time. You can just block it out. You can just ignore it. You can just play the game, do the gameplay. It's a video game. Anyway, wrapping it up. If you like the video, subscribe for more of your second favorite effort, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.